It's how long is a piece of string, or whether you start. It depends what you're using it for, what your agents have access to, what the capabilities are. I think back to my point at the end, like security is always the last thing that people think about, and it gets overlooked, and people don't understand this, so they don't bother. And you've got classical cybersecurity, that's such as making sure identity and encryption, all those things are there. But then with agents, you've also got a whole new vein of attacks of like distillation, poisoning, evasion techniques that people use, where your traditional cyber people don't know anything about it. Coupled with a general attitude certainly in the kind of the large foundational models where everyone's just like, go, 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 and don't worry about security. So there was literally a conference a couple of weeks ago where they had people from most of the major companies, and they're saying, the question was, what are you doing about security? And they're like, basically nothing, because all the money is go fast, because it's winner takes all. So in relation to the question, the biggest thing is, I don't know, it depends where you stick the AI.
Sure, I believe on one of our pilots meetups, we had an interesting presentation from Revolut actually. So Revolut talked about how to use AI and LLMs for the customer support. The customer support is a common task. A lot of companies do that. A lot of websites have customer support. You can just put LLM theoretically behind the form, and LLM will respond to the user. But the problem with LLMs is that sometimes they're inaccurate, so they might give the user some wrong information. They might give users some information they're not supposed to give, and they also might do something on behalf of the user they're not supposed to do. It's actually quite difficult to make it all right. It requires a lot of engineering, a lot of guardrails. In the end, we kind of limit the agent to make the agent work in a way that he cannot really do that much, and then it's more reliable. But once you try to apply it to a broad set of activities, it's actually quite difficult to make it reliable enough to be used in a while. And another big application of agents in cybersecurity that I see is agents that will scroll the web, including the dark web, trying to find some illegal activities happening in there and report it to the authorities. Here you also have a human in the loop, so agent might report something, but the agent will not make any actions affecting anyone directly. It will just report some information that he found to the humans, and humans will make the decision. So yeah, a lot of the problems are going to be mitigated by having human in the loop, but as LLMs are getting better, we might be at the point where agents would actually be truly autonomous.
Just to kind of put a bit more depth into the question for Sandy and Enrico, is there a risk that because with multiple agents that an issue gets magnified? You know, I feel like there could be a problem at the first point of contact with humans, and it could just go out of control.
Go first, up to you.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. I was going to break the queue and scoot this around, but to answer the first part of that question, I think the biggest risk for agents is humans. And Jan LeCun has a great quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it goes something like, the biggest threat to AI is people. And it's true because the lack of understanding and education around it is what's going to cause these issues. If the people building it really invest in understanding some of the things that Fleur was saying, like guardrails and how to stop jailbreaking attempts and how to mitigate for hallucinations and things like this, then we would have much less security issues. And so those are the biggest risks, lack of education in the area, and frankly, it's just not mature enough yet that there are best practices or there are like reference architectures or things to follow for this, because right now every situation is so unique. And eventually, I mean, that will always be true to a case, and that's why we have services and consulting, right? It's because things are unique and not template. But we will understand more, and the more people can educate themselves on these things, the less risk we will have. About the second part, yes, that's definitely true. I wrote a paper on the landscape of agent architectures, and one of the points that we made was that, especially true if you aren't in a multi-agent system, if you don't have evaluation that's built into each step, or you don't have observability at each step, so you know when one agent makes a mistake, is that being fed in as the input to the other agent? So if you can stop it at that point, then you have a lot less risk in the entire system being compromised, and you actually don't know where the mistake was made, and that can propagate and cause more hallucinations.
That's kind of interesting because it's kind of interesting because in traditional cyber, when people kind of have a security operations center, so the people that sit and try and keep the system safe, one of the things they look for is it's not just like an individual single event that happens. Mm-hmm. It's a pattern of events, so it's not just someone accessing something out of hours, it's someone accessing something out of hours in an area they're not supposed to do it, and it's this and the other, and they're just about to leave their job. So similarly with the AI, if you've got multi-agent, there might be things that are safe in isolation, but it's when it's combined with other things. And when you've got a system where no one fully understands all the agents, it's going to get really, really hard to understand what the threats are.
I'm not sure I can add to so much insight that the three of you have given, but I'll try.
It's hard to be last.
Yeah. I'll try, but I'll also start with a comparison from one of my favorite movies, let's say, although it may be a bit old, I'm pretty sure a good chunk of you have seen it, Star Wars Episode 4. There was one place they had to go for the rocket, but that place was needed in that design because they needed the air to breathe for the reactor, right? Now, that was a useful thing to have, but it was also probably given a weakness. In the moment we have more than one space to give to let the reactor breathe, we would have maybe the opportunity of making the reactor go faster, stronger, whatever, so more efficient, but at the same time we have more weaknesses. Same happens if we have more points in the surface that can be attacked as multi-agents as we are talking about. And therefore you may not need the force, you may just need someone that has a decent aim at that point. But just aside the comparison, to give a bit of an idea of where the problem can lie when we have multi-agent type of situation, I make an example related to Gen AI that I incurred in recently. As part of my job, I'm trying to have some fun with the issue that currently universities are facing, that some assignments could be done to some extent from Gen AI in place of the students. And so I tried to make Gen AI collaborate with me as a lecturer in convincing the student that that cannot be done. And I tested it over 3 different AI systems, and 2 of them, with the whole thing I ideated, rejected the idea of doing the job for the student. Great. The third one was like, no, I cannot do it. But I'll take the responsibility. Okay, fine, I can draft you the whole essay. You see where the problem lies. When you have more than one agent, you may have the weakness in one of them. That may have other strengths, don't get me wrong. Most importantly on that, I'm trying not to make names for obvious reasons, it's not nice. But most important on that is what Tom said at the beginning. If you arrive first, you take the big piece of the cake. And that's one of the reasons why security is often put aside. Why? Because people that have a security mindset tend to put problems in front, tend to think, okay, what can go wrong with that? What can possibly go wrong with having that type of system in place? Have you tried and countered this type of issue? Trying to counter these type of issues takes a lot of time, most of the time. So when time is money, we can put it whatever we want. Time is money, well, then you want to have those type of issues out of the way, whether you have dealt with them or not being in your mind. You want that product out. And therefore, that's where the problems become. And we have had plenty of examples. But even if we take it just on the simple malware side, think about the rise on 0 days for systems. Well, that's happening also with AI systems, so AI agents as well. So the issue that you would have with you deploy something in no time before you can even realize someone has already found vulnerabilities they can exploit. And that has nothing to do with the technology itself, that is great in itself. It's just how we design it, how we think about it, the practices you were talking about, all those kind of things are crucial. And we need to work on that because they should come before the product. They often come way later. Not later, way later.
And it must be worse with like Gen AI because things are moving so fast, right? It's something new every single day of the week, and there's a massive pressure on the companies to get the latest model out there. So I guess security falls behind sometimes.
I mean, this time I'll go first, guys. I'll leave you the No, but if you think about it historically. We have started with the first prototype of the internet on the 70s, and then it became mainstream with the dub in the 90s with Tim Berners-Lee, etc. in the 90s. Okay, so 20 years basically from the first attempts to something that was used by the people. We get to mobile phones. We are in the 90s. We get to smartphones in late 2010s. You see how it's shortening. We get to a shortening phase. If we go to telecommunications, it's even worse because nowadays, remember 4G. Does any of you remember the name for 4G? The LTE, what it does stand for? Long-term evolution. We're already testing the 6G. It doesn't look like that long-term though. So we are in that acceleration. Gen AI is just another one that is going faster and making our lives faster.
Thanks, Enrico.
Can I touch just quickly on something Enrico said? You mentioned a problem of trying to, I guess, jailbreak a system to some extent. And it was a security issue, but not a cybersecurity issue necessarily. It was an alignment issue. So it's a different type of security issue where if you have a company that maybe, like turning this into more kind of an enterprise use case, if you are using an LLM or you have some sort of customer-facing chatbot that you don't want to respond a certain way, it's really important that you choose the specific model and you modify the system prompt. There's also all sorts of other things that you do on top of that. But you choose the one that's aligned correctly for your use case. And a really short, funny story is I was working a bit with uncensored models. And at first I was like, I never want to use an uncensored model. I think that they shouldn't really exist. Everything should be aligned. And then I realized that for the use case that I was doing, that I could not get the answer that I wanted the LLM to give me with an aligned model. Because it just wouldn't be mean. And especially some of the ones that are super aligned, like some of the ones on Azure or Claude, super aligned, because that's the ethos of the company, is for them to be the good models, right, the good guys. But for certain things, these unaligned models are still useful, but as long as you know how to handle them and what you're doing with them specifically.
Sandy, you can't do art with censored models. It's impossible. I've tried because almost anything you might want to do in art is like,
exactly.
Paint me a nude
Sure.
or whatever.
Or storytelling.
I mean, I just want to say, when I've tried it, it's always worked for me. I don't know what prompts you're putting in.
Well, I'm coming over to you next anyway, Tom, so I'll put you on the spot. I just thought you're the one in an actual startup doing, trying to combat some of these issues. I'm just wondering, what's the process that you go through? First of all, is it a process or is it technology?
Okay, sorry. In what context? In which process?
In terms of combating the risks that we're talking about.
So, I guess what we do is really, like I say, more based on classical cyber, but it's recent evolutions in hardware. So the things that we're applying are post-quantum encryption and hardware encryption. All that stuff is not really AI itself. We can protect an AI model and you drop an AI model in. So we're solving the problems where you built AI, you didn't put any security on it, and we give you the stuff that will stop it getting tampered with or stolen or used in ways that it's not supposed to be. But there are a whole bunch of attacks that we're not really focused on. That's what other people do. So, like the prompt engineering, if you look at someone like Calypso AI or MindGuard, they're specifically developing agents to attack models, so that they can use AI to attack AI, to red team it, to see where the issues are. You've got people doing research around how do you detect if someone's trying to distill information back out of your model. So everyone saw DeepSeek go and allegedly for 5 billion do what ChatGPT took 80 billion, but some of that was 800,000 queries into ChatGPT that have been structured very carefully. So, and it is interesting because, again, to Sandy's point about like whose responsibility is it? So a typical sort of CISO, like the chief, what's my mind gone blank? Information security officer. Oh, damn, I should know that. Has had his whole career going through identity, encryption, all of this stuff. Doesn't know anything about those kind of prompt injection attacks. You can learn a bit, but it's not in their DNA. And how do you defend against it? Well, you need someone that sort of lives and breathes that kind of stuff. And yeah, obviously, like any problem, loads of startups are springing up to deal with it. Yeah, I mentioned a couple. There's a whole interesting bunch out there, but it depends what problem you're trying to solve. Sorry, I'm sitting on the fence there. Like,
No.
give me some more specifics, and I'll tell you. Who wants?
Feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, just wanted to add some information regarding the previous topic we discussed. Gen AI is developing quite quickly, but there are fundamentally two methodologies in it right now. So the first one is auto-regressive. This is what LLM does. What LLM does, it generates one word after another, and it uses previous generated words to generate the next one. Fundamentally statistical based. It just generates some probability distribution of the next word. It picks the next word from probability distribution. So that's the first methodology. The second methodology is the diffusion models. That is how the pictures are generated, and this is how the videos are generated. And all these methodologies, they don't inherently have a mechanism to program them in a deterministic way. So it's all non-deterministic and all based on training data. So alignment of these models actually means that these models were trained and fine-tuned with some set of data points. Now, if you work with some fundamentally new data, they may not necessarily be aligned with this new fundamentally new data. And that's why all the big companies will have this loop where they will be adding more and more data to align these models with newer and newer data as some new texts are coming up on the internet. So that's a process that's actually have to constantly work.
I think Tom and Fedor there illustrated perfectly how this is almost like two different worlds colliding. And it's probably early days at the moment, right? And I don't know, maybe are IBM, in terms of putting out frameworks, trying to address this kind of divergence between the different worlds? I mean, is it helping, or is it still too early days to be addressing those issues?
Yeah. Yes. And we do put a lot of stuff in the open around it. We're part of the Open Source Security Foundation. We open source a lot of stuff there. We also put out a lot of reports in IBV, or Institute of Business Value, that people can read and kind of draw on where security is being applied. Specifically, one thing that we're working on, and I can speak a little bit more about it because I'm working on this thing, is with Agent Communication Protocol, what I was talking a little bit about, how MCP essentially enables a model to draw upon context from a server, so you can either call a tool, a resource, or a prompt, and then use that as a tool to provide more context to the model itself. So think of that as kind of the vertical layer. And then on the horizontal layer is more agents communicating with other agents as microservices. And where this kind of collides is the security aspect itself. There's like an element of how to secure the model via all the things that I was talking about before, like prompt injections and all that type of stuff. Human in the loop, kind of causing security and all that stuff. And then there's the layer when you're actually having one system talk to another. All of a sudden now you've opened it up over the web and you're talking about how you secure things over HTTP. And so that's where we're building this ACP, or Agent Communication Protocol, and we're adding things like OAuth onto it, where you can authorize one agent to speak to another, and different measures. And again, if you have ideas on this, it's open source, openly governed. You can, check out the discussions that we have there that we're talking about with the community. You can contribute to it if you want, and build it out with us. So yeah, there's stuff that we're doing to try to align these, but you have to remember it's kind of two levels, right? We're talking about like typical security practices along with methods that you might use.
I've got one very quick point to make. If you take anything away from this, if you actually do care about security and AI, if you take anything away, get your phones out, get your pens out. So MITRE is a standard framework that cybersecurity people use. There's MITRE Atlas for AI models. So that's just a kind of a grid framework that you can easily look at and see, am I thinking about all the things I need to be thinking about?
Thanks very much.
May I quickly ask a question about the ACP? I was just thinking one thing, as I tried to say earlier. There's a lot of things that we can learn from some other fields, and in still computer science in general, let's say, and in security as well. We developed security since first malware was 85, if I remember right. There was the virus, for which now we call antivirus instead of anti-malware. But so what I'm thinking is, have you had opportunities to try and think to similar challenges that were in other security aspects and being able to transpose them and apply them into the ACP that you are developing?
Me personally, no. However, we do have a team within IBM Research. Like, we have a large security team, and we have members from that team working on ACP with us. And so they're contributing to the security standpoint. And they come from traditional backgrounds. So yes, they're applying these principles. And right now the truth is that we don't have a lot of security practices in general in this area. And so it's all new. And so we're trying to figure out, do we treat it as normal microservices, or what else needs to be built on top of that?
Great. Okay, look, I'm going to direct questions rather directly because of time. I just want to make sure that I give you guys a good 15, 20 minutes of question Q&A. So, first of all, Enrico, you mentioned really that security is like a cost rather than like a revenue driver. So, as a researcher, first of all, what's the funding environment for you and for other researchers in this space at the moment? Good, medium, or bad?
I mean, funding is never enough in my opinion. That's something. For me, it's fun actually, because I have the side of not having the pressure of being the revenues of the company depend on my work on security. I've had also that as I worked before my PhD in a security operations center with the related pressures of it. But the point is, there's funding opportunities depending on the sizes and. There's some fundings that need the registration with UKRI, but like EPSRC calls, Innovate UK calls in particular for companies are good ones. There's some from other companies, like Google has gotten out a new one recently, not a big one, but always something to consider in any case. I'm not sure how it works, thanks to Brexit, about the EU calls for UK companies, so I can't really help on that side. There's some governmental organizations as well. Sometimes the Alan Turing Institute has some, but another one that has currently some calls out as well is the AI Security Institute. They slightly changed their name. It's a governmental organization, and they have some calls out at the moment. So there's opportunities for fundings. They have their own rules, so you would need, if interested, to check those. You may need to add different companies, charities, universities involved, so people from different organizations. But it's not that bad, because AI in general, security as well, are quite something that drives interest, let alone from venture capitalists, but that's not my area. So there's opportunities there for people interested with good ideas.
That's a good segue into Tom, really, because I want to ask the same question about funding and how it looks from more a startup perspective.
So it depends where you are. So the US is obviously the place to be for funding. I think there was just a recent report where the US raised 7 times more funding for cyber funds in the last year than the rest of the world combined. So, and if you are doing a startup and you are looking to get better terms in the US, the VCs give you more favourable terms. UK VCs are more risk averse, they want you to be profitable quicker, they're not so ambitious. Americans are kind of go big or go home, they want a unicorn, they want a $10 billion company. UK VCs are a bit more timid and they try and box you in. There are support groups for startups or support accelerators and funds here. We've got some funding from the Ministry of Defence have one, so Defence and Security Accelerator. We've got some funding through there. Slightly better chances with that than, say, Innovate. I think DASA is about 25% chance, whereas Innovate is somewhere about 5% chance of getting anything. I was saying earlier, it's the follow-on funding can be a bit challenging. Like they'll give you 150 grand or something up front, but then if if you want to then go out to a project and actually deliver stuff in the real world, and it's not really joined up, and it's a bit hard to do. Companies, in terms of actually going out and selling to companies, companies, even big companies now, are a bit more open to working with startups. They know that a lot of the interesting ideas come out of startups rather than big companies, so there's more appetite for that. I agree with the point earlier about, security is not something that's sexy and doesn't drive money. So with what we're doing, one of the things we do is we can protect people's IP. So if you deploy a model or you want to deploy it into a customer site, you don't want them to steal it. That's actually easier sell for us because you're selling to their salespeople rather than the security people. So you're kind of going, well, if you buy us, then you can sell stuff, so there's instant money. Whereas if you sell security, it's like, if you buy us, you might not, have all your data stolen, or your critical national infrastructure might not shut down. Which, we'll do that next quarter or next year or something, which is what often happens. So, it's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Tom. And to Sandy, I mean, what can IBM do to help both groups, i.e. the institutional researchers and the startup world in open source, as far as this is concerned?
In theory, I might just repeat what I said. But no, I won't do that. But I'll make it brief if I do. But I think we open source a lot of things, particularly in research. So definitely take advantage of that. There's giant teams of people that are, well, sometimes giant teams, sometimes quite small teams. You'd be surprised. Starting these things, putting them out in the open, but they're things that they've started for a reason. Maybe they're met needs that we have, or we see a gap in the market, or we want to meet the needs of others, right? So contributing to these things, reading the studies that come out, it's free information for you to take and either provide to your investors as backing for why you should raise money in this space, free research that's been done for you. And then, of course, that we do acquire companies, but that's a whole other piece.
I'll do a quick plug for ourselves for KXSB, because the idea there is that you put your pre-competitive open source project on the platform, and then we go to Sandy and ask her for support and other people. So we've designed that platform really to get support from people who have deep pockets and give it to people who have shallow pockets. So there's a good incentive to join.
Sorry, that made me remember I was supposed to plug the Laboratory for AOS Security. So that's a government where they're trying to bring in academia, industry and startups together and get that, make the UK a hub for AOS security. And they're trying to join you up if you're a startup with companies that are doing that, or if you're a company, they're joining up with startup and academia. So it's a good place to go. It's got a lot of interest from sort of some very senior people in defence, security, industry. So yeah,
that's a good plug. Look, I think we'll just take a break from the panel for a few moments and just first of all see whether there's anybody with a question at all.
Thank you for the event. I really appreciate it. I love such events. Good talk. I want to talk about my application and my house. So we are getting a lot of requests, ton of requests. We decline it, we block it because of a lot of threats, We are using a lot of services. AI is coming. I'm sure it will be. It will help to us to understand more some patterns or something like this. And this is so expensive, to protect our infrastructure and software. Let's see what's going on with my house. This is real world, I don't see the same situation. So nobody nobody tries to open my door, yeah. And behind my door, I don't have a lot of services, AI and other stuff, yeah. And I think this is the main reason, because we can recognize the person. What do you think? Can we change something and try to find the way how to recognize the person in visual world? And maybe we don't need all this stuff, and maybe we don't need to spend a lot of money. Thank you.
Good question. Enrico?
I want to give you a slightly different angle on the concept of, my house, not many people try and get in. What we tend to do in security, not just in research, everyone, what we tend to do is what's called the threat model. So we evaluate who could be the threat, how likely they are to target us, what would be the vulnerabilities they would exploit, etc., etc. And I'll make an example from a PhD student of mine, because that fits with your idea. We're working on IoT, consumer IoT, and in particular there's a chapter of his work on doorbells. So we actually attack doorbells, because you're not going randomly in the houses and attack doorbells of people. We do it in safe environments. But point being, there's a decent amount of vulnerabilities we have found in common doorbells you can buy. Maybe there's not even a question of how much it costs the hardware to do these kind of things. We were easily able to stay below £100. So sometimes it costs less than the doorbell itself. But who would have the technical knowledge to do that? Who would have the will to do it to a random person, rather than not going, I don't know, not to tell you you're a random person, right? That's just the average type of person. Like, it could be me, I'd say you, but as well as basically everyone here, don't get me wrong. It's just, if you may want to try and do those kind of things then in those boroughs where there's people that have houses of a certain level. But then again, you need to have the technical knowledge. You see how complicated that can get. Now, we do this type of work all the time, both as researchers, as security experts in companies when we apply security properly. So, point being, there's plenty of these threats. There's also the opportunity for these threats. As simple as that. It may be that, I share, like I make you this example of a multi-agent situation. Common defenses, as of you have a local system, your competitor has a local system, and the two systems of defense interact with each other, or the two AI systems doing some sort of work interact with each other to get a better result, both of them. Okay? I'm not leaking to you any information about the data I use, but you can try and infer it through certain type of attacks, and it's something that a couple of my colleagues here actually mentioned. And that type of work happens why? Because you would have the opportunity to gain an advantage, to gain more money. So these type of situations is where you really think a cost-benefit type of thing, where I can do that. And if we're talking about cybersecurity and someone that's trying to get an advantage on that, most probably they have also the technical knowledge. If they don't, welcome to Cybercrime as a Service. And that's where you just pay, and they do it for you. And there's plenty of examples in the last 10 years that we can talk about on that.
I'm just reflecting on that, and I was just thinking that should LLMs themselves not be the best at looking at the total universe of possible outcomes, and somehow be able to solve his problem of having to buy 1,000 different products randomly in the hope that they'll solve everything. I can see it's not something that's going to be solved tomorrow, because the LLMs might hallucinate in looking at the total universe, right? But is that not a possibility in the long term?
It costs too much. It costs too much. Like, if every request comes in and you feed it into ChatGPT, all I'm going to do is spam you with nonsense requests until you're broke. Like, it's a different. You're opening yourself up to a different threat.
I will caveat with that. But inference costs are coming down, so that might be true today, but that might not be true next year.
It's never going to be that far down. It's never going to be as cheap as just sticking a network switch and just bouncing you.
Let's not forget Altman said that 6 ChatGPT requests are a teaspoon of water.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely environmental impacts as well. But you can cache some of these things, right? You don't need to generate them freshly every time. So once you've done them for one thing, if you have, if you're doing pen testing, you're doing the same kind of tests every time. If you're doing QA, you might have a type of QA test that you do on certain types of products. So you're right, it's too expensive to do for everything. But it is being done, and it's one of the biggest use cases is how do we use LLMs that generate code very well to try to red team these systems.
I think this is a good discussion for the networking in a few minutes. But anyway, we've still got more questions.
I don't know that. So you need it because we need to be able to hear you as well. By the way, everybody, we are recording this in case you haven't noticed the big camera about.
Wait, what?
So I'm recently building a lot of apps, AI generated, and it's scary when I see how much stuff is injected by the AI which is not related to me. I'm talking API keys, somebody else's API keys, God knows what, it's horrific. I've been deploying a lot. I don't have a team, so I'm doing everything myself, front-end, back-end, DevOps. And I've launched about 5 products, and then I started looking at my Nginx logs, and I was horrified at the abuse that was coming in. And I know you can pay for services and firewalls and God knows what's in front of it. So I sat there and I thought, well, why don't I build an AI agent, reads my Nginx logs, chunks them, summarizes them, finds patterns, and then it creates, using GitHub Actions, it creates pull requests and says, hey, these are my recommendations, do you want me to do them? And then it will directly go in and modify my Nginx settings. It was pretty cool. It was really cool. And now I actually use the AI agent to do all of my security because it's a lot better than I am, which is a little bit concerning. But that wasn't my question. So yeah, as a result of me going on this journey, I've learned a lot. Mostly how much crap or how much private information I was giving AIs. And of course, I asked an AI, how do I fix this? Because this is wrong. I am literally passing private information to an AI so it can sit there and learn all this stuff about these leads which I'm researching. So that took me down the vector database and embeddings. So I guess my question is, what is the best way to do it, the right way to do it?
The right way to do it is to use like a private AI LLM, and a lot of companies do that. And there's a lot of very good LLMs these days as well. You can run privately. If you have a lot of GPUs, you can run DeepSeek models. You also can run general models if you have less amount of GPUs. It's of course it's expensive, but another thing that you can do if you don't want to pay for GPUs, you can use like third-party providers who by their structure will not be able to accumulate a lot of data, so won't be able to take a lot of advantage of it. So if you let's say you send all the data to ChatGPT might use it, but if you send the data to Together AI, since they have less amount of data, it's much more difficult for them to use it in a meaningful way. So you can actually work with small providers who will provide a serving solution for you. There are a few companies like this. There's Together AI, there is Fireworks AI, and there are a few others as well. You can also rent GPUs, like on Lambda Labs, on Vast AI, and there are other sources as well. You can self-host the LLMs. And yeah, costs are coming down because GPUs are getting cheaper, especially previous generations like A100 are getting cheaper. So you can self-host. You can also run a vector database. There's a lot of solutions, pretty much commodity right now. There's a lot of open source you can run. Just put data in it and automatically get the results from it. And but of course it still costs a bit of money, so there's trade-off. And yes, there is why a lot of people use OpenAI because it's often cheaper.
One thing I'll just add is you mentioned a lot of companies, and I agree with the bank. First, host it if you can. If you can't host it, then I don't know if it's true for personal use, but it's true for business use. I look into the terms, but this is not a plug for Microsoft. I don't work there, but they have a part of their terms is they will take responsibility or account if anything is leaked. And they self-host the models themselves. So you're not hitting the OpenAI inference, you're hitting Azure OpenAI inference. And so there's a little bit more safety in that.
I do know they're not very secure because the British government doesn't allow them.
Fair.
It depends, like, what kind of attack vector you're talking about. Like, if you think that you want to be secure for national security,
Okay, yeah.
that's not something that you can easily achieve. That's the only way you can achieve that is by self-hosting it. But then if you want to be secure, let's say, from someone who want to steal your data, from some bad actors, maybe you're afraid that the companies that you send data to is going to use it in some bad way for you, then you should probably work with companies that have the right terms and conditions for you. And the Azure OpenAI has better terms and conditions than, let's say, vanilla ChatGPT, so you should consider that as well.
What was that last one, sir?
Azure OpenAI
Yeah.
has better terms and conditions than standard ChatGPT.
Yeah, with the same model, pretty much.
Okay.
Also, just make sure you're using Cloudflare, if nothing else.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to go crazy, just the basics will save you a lot.
Any more questions?
Yes, hello. I was interested in your mention of prompt injection attacks. Do you think they're just like a modern day equivalent of SQL injection attacks, or is it more pernicious than that? I mean, if you've got that in SQL, but how do you guard against them?
So first of all, I really like the question, as of it's kind of what I've tried to say about the bridges that there are between different situations. Just to add a small thing more in general about what you were talking about, I actually think it was an IBM founder back in the late 80s who said cache is king first, and then repeated by Lewis Hamilton in March 2020 when COVID
Cache
was
is in C-H-E or?
C-A-S-H.
Oh, okay.
Cache is king. And the point I made recently was, nowadays, data is king because data is cache. And that's kind of the point of, you said rightly so, I'm worried about how much data will give away at these type of situations, and there were great answers about what to use to limit that type of issue. Now, going back to your point, there are definitely similarities. There's different scopes, as oftentimes it's not, like SQL injections were often used to access data that was hosted there. In the case of prompt injection, depends, but it may be more a question of overruling certain situations. And the similar aspects that are in there, like one of the main defenses there is sanitization of the inputs for SQL injections back in the day, so not allowing certain characters to be used or sequences of characters. There's similarities on how certain prompt injections are managed, and so there's things we have probably learned from back in the days with SQL injection in trying to avoid the jailbreaking made by prompt injections. There's also differences. It's important, I think, I see the parallel, and I agree with your point in the question. I think that it's important to see the parallels, to see what we can import, say it almost in programmers' tools, to import from what we have learned from the experience.
Well, it's about learning from history, really.
But also, learning from history as well as seeing the differences in order to not go just on the same solution and thinking that that will be fine. Because there's always similarities and differences. Anyone wants
I was going to add, sorry, I think it's an order of magnitude more complicated, because you couldn't do a SQL injection and then at the end go, and if you don't do it, I'll kill myself and override like the guardrails. So you've got, and you can't do it in Morse code or switch to Swahili and trick it. So all sorts of things, because we don't understand fully how they work. It's really hard to close every avenue off with the guardrails.
Can I mention something? Okay. You can add to this a little bit. This is your realm as well. But there are, in respect to the second part of your question, I was like, well, how do you actually protect against this? There are quite a few methods, a couple simple ones that I think are key, because we have a lot of things coming out now where there's a lot of fine-tuned models or specialized LLMs that are meant to protect against prompt injection. So you can either insert them kind of at the beginning of the pipeline, so before an input comes into the system or the language model, and then at the output as well. We don't need a prompt injection at the output, but you can put guardrails at the output as well. But there's a lot of approaches that you can also take that are a little bit more simplistic, that have been around longer, and they're still AI. They're still like, for instance, you can use typical classification models or linear regression that are trained for your specific use case, that are a lot cheaper to run. You don't have to run all these inferences to the LLM, and can work just as well. So there's lots of methods, but don't get just caught up in the AI hype that the LLMs will do it better. Yeah.
Do we have a final question?
Thank you. We are at a time that generating realistic videos, voice to impersonate anyone is becoming really practical and cheap these days. You can even simulate a passport picture of someone. Does that mean that all this, ID verification has been made, obsolete?
Who wants to answer?
I'll put that. So, in a way, yes. Like, as in, you can't just accept a fuzzy photo of a passport. But yeah, that's probably all right. Now I'll give you a bank account. But where you see, this is where the kind of the hardware side of security comes in. So you're increasingly seeing, if you use Windows, you would have known that when it moved to 11, it would complain if you didn't have a TPM chip. So this is where you've got sort of security. Your keys are generated in hardware and can never leave. So you can't forge where the thing is without breaking the whole cryptography. So your identity is proven by a physical thing that you have. So if you look at somewhere like Estonia, they all have these digital ID cards. They use it for all your public services. You can just kind of stick this card in. It's got a secure chip on it. It's a much more secure way of identifying rather than logging on and NatWest saying make a face, stick your tongue out, and we'll trust it's you. So there are, in that cat and mouse game, there are other things that people are bringing in to make identities more secure.
Are you making the case for ID cards?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if we want to do the politics panel, we'll go into that afterwards. But yeah,
exactly.
If I may add, because he is completely right, but also it's a question. It's an arms race all the time, and there's layers to that arms race. There's policies, there's politics, there's technology. There's, on some aspects, there's a lot of other functionalities and even situations in terms of having the materials to do the thing. So it gets into a whole area. It's not just, how can we fight it? Because there's a lot of steps. So his point is really important on that. And so maybe the idea comes from something else.
Well, you've probably seen passkeys coming out. That's a big thing, which is hardware based.
Okay. You're all very enthusiastic about the topic. So what I'm going to ask really is kind of, just casting ahead. What really excites you about this area, or what frightens you about it, Enrico? That's a.
Well, to me, solving problems is always fun. Okay, let's start from that. So there's a lot of challenges associated to this. To me, the security challenges are even the most important ones, so I think that with Tom we'll have to discuss about those in general. But the most exciting part is more in the future how these will evolve into something else and how prepared will we be, exactly because we're getting into a faster cycle all the time. So I'm curious to see on that point of view what will happen.
Great. Sandy?
Yeah, what excites me is what I will be personally and for everyone else out there able to accomplish. Like I said, I'm not a full stack developer, but I'm doing very much full stack developer things that will take a lot of knowledge to be able to acquire, and anyone now that has some technical experience can start to do these things. So you're going to see people that are capable of learning a lot more and accomplishing a lot more because the resources are almost unlimited. You have this private tutor that's teaching you how to do this alongside. What scares me is not the technology itself, but the people.
Philip?
Yeah, so one problematic part of this whole Gen AI improvements we had over the last 3 years is that scamming became more easy, like much more easy, right? You can, especially since scammers don't yet have the technology, they haven't adopted them yet, but then soon at some point they will start impersonating some relative or victim. They can impersonate in the voice and in the face as well. So that's not good. And there might be some methods we can fight them with, especially since Gen AI creates a lot of artifacts specific to generative AI, can be detected. Since it's a neural network, it's not really a natural way to generate the text. So it's possible is that it could be detectable and could be preventable. But I think it's still an open question. If AI is going to be so good that we won't be able to detect it in a reasonable compute time. And the good part of it is that we all know that Gen AI unlocks a lot of economic value and learning that people can go and ask ChatGPT different questions, and also automates a lot of mundane tasks and otherwise people will have to do. So that's a good part.
Thanks, Ed. Tom.
AI apocalypse. That's the thing that keeps me up at night. I don't know, like it just seems there's an awful lot.
It's nice to end on a good note.
No, there's so many things that it can be useful when you look at like AlphaFold or whatever, where they've gone and they've done all that genomic stuff. It's like, wow, this is wild. But then you see that the real money is just going to some fairly sketchy people. So I hope that they work out the kind of the governance and the policy side of things to keep us safe, because otherwise it's going to be 10 tech trillionaires living in towers fighting each other with autonomous drones. And we're scrubbing around the wastelands. Sorry, you said positive.
You've given us a good reason to go and get a drink.
Yes.
So everybody's welcome to join us upstairs. I think we've got drinks and pizzas. But well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'd really like to thank my panel here. So thanks everybody.